We're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom Amello and Nick Kling. Thank you for staying with us. Thank you for joining us. We are delighted to be joined once again by our good friend Steve Crist from the Daily Racing Form. Steve authored the book Exotic Betting, and he's here today to talk about a portion of the book, Multi-Race Exotics, and the latest enhancement to Formulator, Ticket Maker. Steve, welcome back to the program.
Hey, guys. How are you?
We're terrific because it stopped raining up here and things are fine. Steve, a couple of things here. Now that Ticket Maker is formally a part of formulated product, I went back to your book and started to look at what you had actually written. And where I'd like to start, and before we talk about the program itself, is just the whole concept and the context of multi-race betting. And one of the questions you pose on page 103 of the books is, are you playing in a bankroll appropriate pool? And I think before we talk about how Ticket Maker will help folks, let's just talk about who should and shouldn't be in the pool, the multi-race pools.
Yeah, well, it's America. You can play whatever pool you want.
Well, you know what I mean.
My experience has been that a lot of players probably are playing at one pool too difficult for the amount of money that they're comfortable getting involved with. If you're coming to the track, with a bankroll for the day of $100, you probably shouldn't, tie up half of it playing the pick six. It's my experience that a $48 investment in the pick six is not much better than setting your money on fire. It just doesn't give you enough enough combinations to be competitive. It ties up way too much of your available cash. And, I think that some players who are playing the pick four, say, with, $18 or $24, would probably do better dropping back a notch and playing the pick three with that kind of bankroll. These bets, even though they're only a $1 minimum, having only 12 or 16 combinations available to you in a pick four, it's very, very tough to get through one with that little money.
And I appreciate what you said. You're absolutely right. Certainly anybody can be in any pool, but the bottom line is to get money out of the pool, and Ticket Maker is a way to construct tickets using your opinion with the best available bankroll and most efficient bankroll. So let's talk about how it's come from your methodology, what I call paper and pencil, to an electronic enhancement to Formulator.
Yeah, what Ticket Maker really does is to automate, something I've been doing on the back of scrap paper and envelopes for 20 years, which is to make out multiple tickets in these multi-race bets. I've found over the years, starting with the pick six and now with the pick four becoming so popular, it seems to me that the most successful players I know don't just make out one ticket using every horse that they'd like to include. That there are smarter ways of spending your money by making out multiple tickets and giving yourself options. So that if you're really right in a couple of races early in the sequence, if you can really narrow it down to one or two horses, then it opens you up in the later races to add additional horses. So rather than, if you're putting, say, $48 into a pick four, rather than just making one ticket that goes 2 by 3 by 2 by 4, there are ways to make out 4 or 5 tickets, spend the same $48, and give yourself a chance to pick up, some additional long shots in one of the races.
We need to make it perfectly clear that Ticket Maker does not handicap races for you.
Absolutely not. It's a money management ticket making program. You still got to come up with the horses on your own.
Steve, were you at all part of the software development, or how did it get from the book and theory to something like it is now?
Well, really, once the programmers wrapped their mind around it and the light bulb went off, they did all the work. I didn't participate in the actual software construction. And when I try to explain multiple tickets to people, they frequently just stare at me like I've got two heads. But once they start fooling around with it, I think with this little piece of software, for a lot of people, they're going to go, Oh, now I see how it works. And, this is a colorful, fun, simple to operate thing rather than listening to me rant on like a lunatic.
Yeah, well, we have the ability to put up the reader's guide on our screen for folks. And Nikki, if you scroll down to the categorizing horses, we'll show folks what Steve's talking about in terms of colorful. In other words, Steve, there are boxes representing the legs of races and also boxes that represent the opinion horses. And why don't you just go over the ABCs and X's, please?
Yeah, what you really do as a first step is to designate every horse that you're interested in using on your ticket as either an A, a B, or a C selection. With the A's being your top choices, usually 1 to 3 horses a race, the ones that you're willing to anchor your play around. B horses being the next tier of horses, of strong contenders, and C's are those kind of marginal contenders and appealing long shots who, if you're right everywhere else, it would be great to pick up in this, one, say, wide open leg in the race. And once you drag your horses into either the A, B, or C columns, the program then calculates how much it would cost to cover all those horses on various tickets.
Yep.
And, if on your first pass it comes up $120 and you only want to spend $60, then you got to start moving some horses around and downgrading them.
Steve, I've noticed that in your blog on Daily Racing Form, you often go over some of the methodology and the horses that you've used. And you might, rather than just designate them A, B, or C, you might have, a BC or an AB or that sort of thing. And I'm sure many of our listeners out there do the same thing. It's, I like, horse 5 if the 6 is scratched and the 5 becomes lone speed and that sort of thing. So can you describe a little bit, the methodology that you use when you're fine-tuning your A, Bs, and Cs?
Yeah, I mean, on a first pass through a sequence where you designate horses as A's, B's, and C's, almost all the time you're going to end up with tickets that are just more money than you want to spend. There's almost always a kind of second round of winnowing. Now, if you're just playing one ticket in these bets, as most people do, you end up shaving horses out of your play entirely, and those seem to be the kind of horses, who come back and bite you when it's all over, and that interesting 8-to-1 shot who you just couldn't afford on a single ticket play. And in that second round process, they're very tricky hairline decisions, and that's what a lot of these things come down to. You're not necessarily always using the horse you think has the slightly greater chance of victory, but frequently you'll upgrade a horse because you think he's going to be 10 or 12 to 1, and you think he has just as good a chance as almost anyone. And you might end up downgrading to a C or throwing out entirely, a kind of 3-to-1 or 4-to-1 second choice who you just say at the end of the day, you know what, I'm willing to let this horse beat me.
And Steve, I think it's important to mention, I don't think our listeners need to be reminded, but New York cards a lot more races now that some people would say are lower quality than they used to at Saratoga or the Belmont Summer Meet, or we've got the turf sprints now, the New York bred races at a much higher percentage than they used to be on a 9 or 10 race card. And if you get a turf sprint, for example, where maybe you leave 5 or 6 horses open, if you're trying to play what you would call a caveman ticket, it can get pretty expensive.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. Sometimes in those open races, you end up having to split up horses. If you've still got 6 horses open in one of those impossible turf sprints, rather than going 6 deep in that race on a single ticket and having to shave everything else down to 1 or 2 horses, you might end up having to split those 6 horses into 3 A's and 3 B's, or 2 A's, 2 B's, and 2 C's, and make some preferences there. And, again, if everything else works out perfectly, you'll still be alive to all 6 of them. But, if things go slightly amiss, you might only have 4 of them. If things go very amiss, you might only have 2 of them. But at least it keeps you in the game.
Steve, Tom Amello here again. Printing, you can print the tickets, which I think is interesting and important. And, you also talk about in the book and everywhere else, really, that this is a game of preparing, of preparation. And so while if someone has Formulator on the laptop, they can be creating tickets at the track, if you will. Creating early tickets and printing them out gives you a chance to see exactly how your opinion might be spent.
Yeah, and if you just arrive at the track or begin your day of wagering with some kind of a rough plan in place, that gives you such a leg up on everyone else. One of the things that should always make a horse player feel good is when he sees people standing on the betting line, still doing their handicapping and still trying to figure out their tickets, because that's a tough way to succeed at the track. But, if you come even with a rough draft and then you make adjustments depending on a late scratch or two or how the track is playing, you're in much better shape than figuring it out with 3 minutes to post.
Two final things. First of all, I do believe that Ticketmaker will be available through the end of July with all forms of web formulator, and then after August 1st, it'll be part of the upper tier version. Is that correct?
Yeah, we wanted to give people the month of July to fool around with it, play with it, see if it's something they like and something they want to upgrade to in the future.
Last thing, Steve, and this is nothing to do with Ticketmaker. From time to time, Tim O'Leary has secured for us several of your handicappers from Daily Racing Form. And I want to tell you that both our audience and we here, we're always impressed when we get to meet a Mike Welch or Steve Klein or a Jim